Love often takes unexpected twists and turns, but that just makes the story more interesting.
I caught her, and that was it.
Oh my goodness, I think I'm falling in love with this boy.
I told my husband, if you marry me, you're going to laugh for the rest of your life.
Join us as we continue to bring to life the Canadian love stories of romance, family, friends, and community.
Well, love is the most important thing.
I think everyone's so angry right now, and I get it. Like, there's a lot of things to be angry about, but I don't know if change comes from the anger. I think anger just creates more fear and chaos. And if I can calmly talk about things and say it with love and compassion and share and lived experience, I think that a lot more change comes from that.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Canadian Love Map. We've got a big dose of joy in store for you in this episode, and it feels particularly timely. Myles Sexton grew up in a small town on the East Coast, but felt different from an early age. Eventually, a move to Toronto and a personal tragedy helped facilitate a shift into authenticity and an enduring positivity. Myles is an international fashion trailblazer, an activist, advocate, and a storyteller for whom love shines brightly. Myles Sexton, welcome to the Canadian Love Map podcast.
Thank you so much for having me.
I have to say that your bio is just popping out at me because I don't know if I've ever had a guest with such a dynamic variety of roles. And I go from creative director to stylist to makeup artist, TV regular, podcast host, activist, and queer fashion nomad.
I wear a lot of hats, so.
That's my favorite, that last one. Do you want to start? Tell me about that, actually.
Growing up in Nova Scotia, I always loved the outdoors and hiking and sort of exploring. And I think I fantasized for a long time around this nomadic life of traveling and seeing the world, which is something I still continue to do. But I think I've always sort of bridged fashion and my love of travel together. So I think I sort of came up coined this term as a queer fashion nomad because it just sort of represented three kind of loves of my life, I guess.
It's amazing. And I'm delighted that you started by saying you grew up in Nova Scotia, which I just discovered right before we hopped on here. And I'm so glad to know that. And I believe it was Brooklyn, Nova Scotia.
Yeah.
Where you were born.
Valley.
Tell me what that early life was like for you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes with its benefits and it comes with its downsides too of growing up in a town of under 2,000 people, it's pretty small. I loved just, the access to nature and, growing up in sort of this rural farming community. I think I was always sort of around lots of animals and my parents and I were always going on hikes and stuff. So, I think I cherish those sort of memories. But I think as I got older, learning, kind of coming into my identity and my sexuality, I think it was really isolating, living in a small town. I also didn't grow up with television or internet. So I felt like I was very different than everyone that I went to school with, but I couldn't really understand what that was because I didn't really have any reference points. And I kind of ended up leaning more towards history and especially Greek mythology, and because it was my only sort of other reference point of just gender diversity, I guess, that I saw within textbooks that I was reading.
That's fascinating to me, actually, when you say you didn't have TV or internet. And as soon as you said those words, I thought, wow, then where were your role models? I always feel like when you take a different kind of path than everyone around you, there's got to be someone shining a light on that path.
Yeah.
So you can go, hey, there's a path there.
It's so true. And I think that's why I guess my love of sort of history of ancient cultures, I think really stemmed from that, because I think it allowed me, I guess, to transport myself to a time where I think the world was actually a lot more accepting of gender diversity versus, like, I think this present time where it very much feels like, this battle, for
Mhm.
existence, I guess.
So who would your first role model have been?
I mean, to be honest, it was my grandfather. He was like such a character, he came from nothing. He was like adopted and he built like an empire of his business in Nova Scotia. So he started Nothing Fancy Furniture
Oh,
in
really?
Nova Scotia. So which is kind of cool. And my grandfather was a singer. He was an actor as well. He owned like so many different types of businesses outside of just the furniture business. So I think he was someone that I really looked up to because I felt like even though he was like a very masculine person, like I think just the fact that he kind of said like fuck it and like went for whatever he wanted, I really that really inspired me a lot.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And was he, and I guess you can extend that to your family, but in particular, since we're talking about your grandfather, was he accepting when you really came into your own and took that path
Yeah,
that was unique to you?
I mean, yes and no. My grandfather had a harder time, I think, with like more my like gender expression versus like my sexuality. The further I got in my journey and the more successful I became, I think the more he really just like knew that didn't matter what he thought, like I was gonna keep doing it. And clearly, like I was building a name for myself in the modeling industry and in the end was very supportive of me and really celebrated everything that I have accomplished.
Miles, when did fashion start to play a role in your imagination?
I would probably say around like 15, I guess. Like we got dial-up internet and I finally get my space and I was so excited and I had like discovered this world of like, these kind of subcultures of fashion, like punk, like the punks and the emo people and like I just like became enamored that, there was like actually groups of people out in the world that, wore fitted clothing and wore makeup and like kind of broke these like societal gender norms. As soon as I saw other people, I was like, oh, it gave me sort of permission to start leaning into that myself.
It's almost like when you describe that, I think of somebody kept in a box and you finally get a chance to open the lid and there's this whole wide, colorful world around you.
Legit. As a family, like when we would leave like our town, we would go to like other rural places. So it wasn't even like we were going into Halifax very often because there was just like my family had this idea of like, oh, Halifax is dangerous and scary and like I don't know, just like that very like rural mentality when they look at cities. So
Mhm. So in so many cases like yours, there is that real, itchiness in the feet to say, "I've gotta get out of here." And when did that happen for you and how?
Yeah, so I mean, I got signed with a modeling agency when I was 16 in Halifax. So I started kind of working with this local agency and we did like some local fashion shows like in the malls and stuff. And I was able to pick up some like commercial work and, some extra work on like some film sets and stuff, which was really cool to like be able to do that at the end of high school.
Was it mostly girls that you were working with at that point as models, or was there a
I
diversity?
think there was like only two other male models at my agency.
You cornered the market.
Yeah, I mean, basically, I was actually really surprised because, like, I got a lot of work when I was in Nova Scotia, but, I had aspirations and dreams to, like, grow beyond, I think, like, Nova Scotia, and I knew Toronto was sort of the place for that, and, the thing with modeling is that what people don't understand is that, like, it takes a long time to get paid, so, like, you'll do a job and then you get paid like 3, 6, sometimes 9 months later, and so, like, it's so hard to, like, sustain a life off of that, like, especially at the beginning. Like, once you get going, it kind of fills in the gaps, but, like, it's definitely hard.
It's hard to tell your landlord, "I'll pay you in 6 months."
Yeah, exactly. I'm just waiting for this TV commercial to pay me finally. And so I started doing makeup as like a way to like make sort of like instant money because I was like really good at doing my own makeup when I was younger and so I was like I feel like this is a skill I can kind of like get a regular job. And so yeah, so I end up like getting a job with a cosmetic company and they had offered me a job in Toronto to come like fly out and like work with them there. So I literally like packed my bags in like 2 weeks and moved to Toronto on my 19th birthday and kind of like went there with a suitcase full of vintage clothing and was just like hoping, I would kind of make it in the world. So
I wanna pause for just a second
yeah,
to make an observation, if you don't mind,
yeah,
and that is, we really this is a podcast about love, right?
yeah.
But we also really like to focus on joy,
Oh my
which is what love produces so often, and I can't help but remark on the fact that you have this joyful spirit that just kind of shines through the computer at
Oh,
me.
I'm happy to hear that.
It's so like and I can feel your enthusiasm, and it's such a pleasure to and I can understand why you have a magnetic presence on all the platforms and in person everywhere because you just got this joyful spirit. Do you feel that was liberated by this change in location and life plan sort of?
Joy has been something I've had to learn how to accept. And because of where I grew up and like the circumstances that I grew up under, I felt like I didn't really give myself permission to be happy. Because
Right.
I didn't feel like I deserved it. And
Mhm.
I met someone when I first moved to Toronto, and he was like the first love of my life. Unfortunately, he died of suicide, and when I was
Oh
like
my gosh.
23, and you know, from his death, I think it taught me joy. And as like odd as that might sound,
Mhm.
yeah, like losing him really made me look at like my life and the world that I was living in and the things that I was like investing my time and energy into. And it really made me like look within myself and just like, yeah, I guess the things that I was prioritizing. And yeah, I think that that was a really big, like, shift in my life that kind of, like, led me on this path of self-care and sort of, like, healing of my own internalized shame, and I think from that, it I think in loving myself, it sort of taught me how to, like, accept love and accept joy. So, yeah, I think it's
Oh,
been a
that's
journey.
beautiful. Yeah, no, that's really beautiful, and I hear you use the phrase internalized shame, and I know that when I was reading some of the articles on your website,
Mhm.
I was very curious about your hair because I think hair plays such a,
Totally.
uh, deep role in society for so many people, and especially women. I'm someone who has
100%.
silver hair.
Yes.
And a lot of women, when I let my hair go silver, were like, "Whoa, that's
Right.
really brave."
I love it.
And I think, I don't think it's brave, but it's liberating.
Totally.
I'm curious for you to talk about how your hair is so representative for you and if there's a role in your relationship with shame.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like my hair has definitely been a journey, and it's something that I think I've used a lot as like part of my gender expression. When I was younger, it was long as well, but I would like dye it all these different fun colors and then when I was modeling, I end up like shaving the sides of my head and was sort of rocking this like long mohawk sort of thing that was very androgynous and yeah, and then sort of like I guess like where I am now, where I've just sort of like let it all like naturally grown out and it's like my natural color. I think it was just sort of like me, I think just like fully coming into who I naturally was. Like and so I think that is definitely connected to shame. For a long time, I think I used my hair as like a way to sort of like disguise myself and like hide behind it. But like
Mhm.
where now it's definitely, I think like very much just an extension of my inner being. I love like, especially even in like indigenous and so many other cultures, like you grow your hair basically until someone passes or there's like a lot of like spiritual like connection, I think, to hair. And I feel that connection within myself, I think with my own hair too.
And also a sort of personal power.
Yeah, definitely.
I think I read you and I found this very powerful and profound, when you talked about reclaiming your power
Yes,
one hairdo at a time, and
totally.
I was like, "Yes, that's beautiful."
It's so true.
You've moved to Toronto, you're breaking into the modeling scene. I'd love to hear about model boot camp.
Yes. Coming to Toronto, I think it was like a bit of like a slap to the face, I think, because I think like I had this idea of like success and like what that sort of trajectory was gonna look like for me. And I went from being like a big fish in a small pond in a very short amount of time to like a very small fish in like a massive ocean. So, it was definitely a bit of an eye opener because I was having a hard time trying to find a modeling agent and, I wasn't able to like get any work. And, I was just trying to find like my place in the industry because I felt like the industry was very commercial. And I think I had like a bit more of like an editorial, like runway sort of look. I had heard about a casting for this like fashion week that we have in Toronto called Fashion Art Toronto. I was looking at photos online and like it was like a pretty diverse group of like models on the runway. And I was like, okay, I feel like I could do that. But I was trying to find like a way that would like I would differentiate myself from a lot of those models. So I had been like teaching myself how to walk in high heels at that time. And so I showed up to the casting and I like was like, oh, like I would love to show you my walk in heels. And like the casting directors and like the owners of the fashion week were like so blown away by like how good I was at walking in the heels that they were like, I heard from them like I think a couple days later being like, your books like for fashion week, like we want to set you up with a bunch of designers, like we think you would be fantastic. And it sort of was like my breakout, I guess, like into the industry because I think like that season I booked like 20 something shows, which was like bananas. And it was
Wow.
cool because it's like I was able to do like men's and women's wear. And I loved, again, this idea of being like a disruptor when it comes to like societal norms. So that was sort of like, I guess, my entry into the world here.
Did that feel like a stage of real confidence for you, or was it a fake it till you make it kind of confidence?
Oh, I was definitely terrified because
Oh, yeah.
like
Been there.
I had like feminine qualities to my body, but I wasn't super feminine, like I wasn't passing in any way. And
Mhm.
so, I was always like looking for, I guess, like ways that I could sort of like embrace my femininity and celebrate it. That sort of like balanced out my masculine and feminine, I think, of just who I was.
And what was the world's reaction to you there?
I mean, to be honest, like people loved it. Like it was very much I think, like, a viral moment, I guess, if you could say that for that time because, I was getting booked by literally, like, everyone, and then I started, like, traveling the world, like, going from fashion week to fashion week, and, because, like, there wasn't a lot of people like me doing that, so, like, I think designers really, like, loved using it, as a way of, like, creating buzz and hype, I think, around their collection with, like, having someone that was, like, a disruptor like me in their show.
We couldn't share the great stories that we do here on the Canadian Love Map podcast without the amazing support of Charm Diamond Centers. They are Canada's largest family-owned jeweler, and they're proud to be putting love on the map. The folks at Charm Diamond Centers are thrilled to be a part of your love story. So visit charmdiamondcenters.com or one of your local stores. Love starts here.
I think for most of us, ideally, our life journey is about finding our authentic self
Mhm.
and being able to live in a way that we are our authentic self rather than having to put on a mask to
Yeah.
show the world we're what they want us to be. How did that happen for you? Because I certainly see that it seems to have.
Yeah, I mean, I think, like, all of the modeling and doing makeup and stuff, like, those were all, like, extensions of who I was, but I don't think that it was, like, the full me, you know? Like, it
Mhm.
was it was definitely, like, a very, like, ego part of myself that had something to prove. I think growing up not feeling beautiful and, like, trying to, like, find success in an industry that I think validates beauty, it was driven by ego and, like, me trying to prove a point, I think, to, like, other people.
It's almost like the pendulum had to swing
Yes,
all the way the
exactly.
other
It went
way.
totally
Yeah.
the other way, and in losing my partner, that was a big, like, sort of check in my life, and then I got diagnosed with HIV when I was, like, 26, and I think that that was sort of, like, another kind of huge moment where I literally thought that I was gonna die, and
Mhm.
it was just really scary to kind of, like, go through that experience of getting diagnosed and the unknown and not sure, like, what was gonna happen, and I think it was, like, within that healing, that the mental healing of getting my diagnosis that I think that I really, like, found who I was and started sharing it online and really, like, leaned into vulnerability where I really, like, hid and avoided it for such a long time.
It's fascinating, isn't it, when something that seems like such a crisis or tragedy in our life can lead us to this whole other way of living and being, and especially if that is a way of living that gives us purpose and shines the light on a path for others.
It's so true, honestly, and it's I get it, like you said, it was such a traumatic thing for me, but it's been the biggest blessing of my life because it's allowed me to really, like, put my life into perspective and, like, invest my time and energy into the things that bring me joy and happiness, and I have to say, like, these last, like, 5 years of my life have probably been some of the happiest years of my life.
So was your diagnosis or your tragic loss of your partner part of your self-love journey in the end when you look back?
I think they were like the wake up calls that I sort of needed to like stop leaning into my own ego and start leaning into self care and like self acceptance and reclaiming my power. I think over a lot of like the internalized shame that I had like suppressed inside of myself.
And how did the world shift when you shifted?
Yeah, I mean, it was a little scary, like, because, I'd been sharing my modeling and my makeup work, online for so long. So people very much like wanted that from me. And then now I was leaning into sort of like my life and being honest about like the things that I was going through and being vulnerable. And like I was still like showing my fashion side, but it wasn't the whole thing. And to be honest, like it also that led to, I think, even more success in my life, like yes, I had a very successful like start to my career, but in terms of like the brands that I'm working with now and like the public exposure that I'm getting now, it doesn't even compare to when I was younger. And I think that really has to do with being vulnerable and honest about my life, because
Mm.
I think people are looking for, in this world that is now becoming AI generated, I think people are looking for realness, and want to connect with people.
Absolutely. What has your ability to be an activist in the realm of HIV and AIDS meant
Mhm.
to you?
At the end of the day, when I, like, left my small town and moved to Toronto, like, wise Miles, like, wanted to leave this world, like, a better place than the one that I came into? And so I think my activism around, like, HIV/AIDS and sobriety and just, like, being an advocate for my own community, it's just allowed me to kind of, like, fight for my community and give representation for my community and, like, teach people about it. I always joke, like, I think I, like, attract everyone in with, like, my fashion and my makeup and my outfit, but then I'm like, "Oh, here, let me teach you something?"
Oh,
And so it's become this, like, really beautiful kind of symbiosis that's happening in my life.
wow. What I just heard you say is that you pull people in with your outer beauty
Mhm.
and then you reveal your inner beauty.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
And it takes understanding and embracing your inner beauty in order to share it, I think.
So true.
How do you talk to young people, or what advice do you have for young people who are really struggling to embrace their own gender identity in a strange time? 6 years ago, I would have said, "It's such a great time to be transitioning." I have a friend who is a musician who transitioned, and I thought, "Wow, it's so perfect." Like,
Mhm.
they're in the sweet spot of timing, and now there's been such a slide,
Yeah.
such a horrific kind of slide backwards in our societal mentality.
It's so true, and it's sad, it's really sad to see that, but, I think like we were saying earlier with the pendulum, I think we were able to get ahead, and now we have to go back a little bit so we can go even further forward, and I truly believe in that, but I feel like for the younger generation, I think for me anyway, when I was growing up, I felt this sort of need that there it was like a race and that I had to just like wake up one day and like know exactly who I was. And I think that put a lot of pressure and anxiety and like stress on me. And I think that that's like sort of I think my advice to younger people is like slow it down. Like enjoy this moment, enjoy how you're feeling today. You're probably going to feel different tomorrow. And that like you don't have to know who you are overnight. And it's okay to like discover that and explore that. And I think society like pressures us to like put a label on who we are or how we identify. And I think that that is like such a toxic script to follow. And yeah, I really wish that I had given myself more like grace, I think, in my younger years of figuring out who I was versus trying to like force myself to be something that I don't think I entirely was, you know?
Yeah, I think your story would be so inspiring for younger people, given that you've been able to achieve what you have, both professionally and personally, having started in a small town
Totally.
where there was no acceptance. So you've really gone from 0 to 100. You
Absolutely.
know?
My life feels so, when I go back home, I'm like, wow, like I can't believe I got out.
Do you know an image that I saw of you in your social media that was so powerful and impactful was wearing the rainbow dress, the
Oh yeah, with a
Amsterdam
flag.
Rainbow Dress.
Yeah.
Can you describe it and explain to our listeners what it's about? Because it seems like a very timely piece of fashion at
Yeah,
this
I mean,
moment in
it's
our
been around
history.
for a while, but it's like I feel like it's so relevant right now, especially. So this designer in Amsterdam basically designed this amazing dress that has like every flag of every country on it. And when a country like puts policies in place that like decriminalize like LGBT or same sex gender diversity, they like replace that country's flag with a rainbow flag. So it's pretty good. Like it's pretty symbolic, I think, to just like call out. I think the countries that have still not like updated their policies and still criminalize, same-sex
Mhm.
relationships and like LGBT identities. And a lot of people don't realize. I think it's still like 96 countries in the world. It's still a criminal offense that you could go to jail or you could actually be like killed for being a part of like my community. So
It's
um,
shocking.
yeah, so I think, like, the dress, like, really just, like, helps to create awareness, and it's, like, so massive, right? So it's
I was gonna say you use
visual
the words
impact.
call out, but it really shouts out because it's 52 feet long.
Yes, it is massive.
And so the flags are large and it is just what was that photo shoot like for you?
Yeah, I mean, well, so we shot, like, up in the CN Tower, which, like, already was, like, so cool getting to do a photo shoot in there. I don't know if a lot of people can say they got to shoot in the CN Tower. And, I could barely move it. Like, they had, like, a whole team of people like holding different sections of the dress so we could like create movement. And I was kind of like, okay, I'm just standing here and like trying to move my arms and pose a little bit differently because it was just like it was such a like worldly like amount of fabric. So
And from the physical to the, symbolic,
yeah.
like how did it feel standing in that dress knowing what it represented?
Yeah, I mean it was so powerful. I think it made such a statement, I think, for my community and really like be such an outwardly like non-binary queer person wearing it. I think especially like with the countries that like the flags were on it, it was really interesting when I posted it online afterwards because like a lot of people was like, "Oh, I recognize my flag. I love that. I love seeing my flag on there." And then they like read more about like why I'm wearing it, and then they're like,
Oh,
"Shit." Yeah, like
yeah.
so it was an interesting sort of like thing because like for them to see me so glammed up and then like wearing their country's flag, like that was really cool to them. But then they realized like why their flag was on the dress. So I don't know. It was
Mm.
like just such a cool experience.
We talked about self-love in your journey. How does the role of love in general play a part in your life these days?
Oh my gosh, I feel like it's probably the emotion that I focus on the most. Like
Mm.
I'm getting married in September, so like,
Yeah.
I feel like that's been a big part of my like getting ready for the wedding and just like my relationship with my partner. And I think just the love that I have for myself, the love that I have for my community and the people that I'm trying to advocate and fight for. Yeah, I think I lead with love now and it is very much, I think, into like my everyday. So
Yeah, you use the expression "fight for," but your weapon seems to be love.
it is, totally, because I don't think that, like, I think everyone's so angry right now, and I get it, like, there's a lot of things to be angry about, but I don't know if change comes from the anger. I think anger just, like, creates more fear and chaos, and if I can calmly like talk about things and like say it with love and compassion and share and like lived experience, I think that a lot more change comes from that.
That's a beautiful way to put it. The podcast is called The Canadian Love Map. So, I'm gonna get more personal and ask about your love story because you dropped that beautiful love bomb that you're getting married in September. Can you tell us about this relationship that has lit up your life?
Yeah, so his name is Tyler. We like met, I think it's like 15 years ago this year. So we met through sort of like my chosen family. They had invited us to like a Thanksgiving dinner where like they would sort of bring together a lot of different people like within the community that didn't have a family to celebrate like Thanksgiving with. And I was dating someone at the time, he was dating someone at the time, and but there was sort of this moment where we met for the first time at this dinner and we locked eyes and there was like I don't know, this like instant connection and we were like kind of there was like this weird pause where we all like we both stopped talking and we're just like kind of getting lost in each other's eyes and so it was interesting and that sort of moment had sort of stuck with me. I always felt like there was like this weird energetic pull that was kind of pulling my body towards him and we sort of weaved in and out of each other's lives for like 10, 12 years before we started like we went on our first date and then I friend zoned him again like after our first date because I was like, oh, too real. Like he had so much love to give me, and I was like not in the headspace to like even
Mm.
welcome his type of love in. That was like a very real love. When my grandfather passed away, he had reached out to me, and he knew how close I was to my grandfather, and he was one of the only people in my life that was really like there for me through losing my grandfather. And I was like, you know what? I need to give this guy like a chance. I think I'm ready to like accept his love and accept a love that I actually deserve. Now we've been dating for a couple of years and are getting married, and I feel like we're just like making up for lost time in some ways because we've just known each other and have been friends for such a long time.
What would you say to your younger self? Like, I don't know if you could have imagined when you were feeling trapped in that small town
Yes.
without a sense of real identity that you would ever be living this full and joyful life. Did you dream it?
I mean, like this is the thing that like I'm such a dreamer, and like I don't know. I always believed that like the life that I wanted was the one that I could create. And I don't know. I don't know if I ever like doubted it. I know that there was definitely hard moments, but like I remember reading this book when I was in high school. It was called like The Alchemist, and it was like
Love it.
yeah, I don't know if you read it, but
Yeah.
yeah, and it talks about sort of your personal legend and sort of like the destiny that the universe has for you. And I think like when you believe in your dream and like what you want to accomplish, that like and you put that energy forward, I think the universe like conspires to like support you. And I think I've always knew that that was inside of me. I hoped that my life would become this, but in other ways, I knew it was going to happen, and I would do whatever it took to get there.
Well, I can't thank you enough for bringing your joyful energy onto our podcast today and spreading it through the airwaves.
Ah,
And I want to put you on the spot
yeah.
before I let you go. Do you think there's a chance that you'll come back with Tyler and talk to us again
Oh,
sometime?
absolutely. I'm sure Tyler would love it. We have he's such a character. So
All right, then let's not say goodbye. Let's just say to be
yeah,
continued.
we'll see. We'll see you soon.
Sounds fantastic. Thank you so much. I cannot thank you enough.
Oh, this has been such a delight.
All the best.
You too. Bye.
Thanks so much for listening to the Canadian Love Map. This podcast is presented and made possible by Charm Diamond Centers. It's hosted by me, Nancy Regan, and is produced and distributed by Podstarter. We love sharing love stories of all kinds, and that could include yours. So do you or someone you know have an uplifting tale to tell? Reach out to us on Facebook or Instagram using @CanadianLoveMap or email producer@podstarter.io. We'll be back next week with another love story to add to the map.